Good morning. I'm Amber McCarthy. I'm a social worker, a youth social worker with HDSA, and have worked with the Center of Excellence in Houston for a number of years. And I'm just really thrilled to be here. I was telling the folks here in person that this is such an important topic, and yet our room is not full. So I don't know how many of you are online, but I really hope that making this more and more accessible to have these difficult conversations will be helpful to all of you. So we're going to do a combination today of, some PowerPoints, but we have some lovely panelists today. We're all social workers, and we're going to be having a conversation. And I also don't know how we get questions from people who are online.
So it'll be live streamed through the app.
Got it. So if you have a question, you can, even if you're in person or elsewhere, you can put it through the app. Okay. Marian.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Marian Emmerich. I currently work at the Huntington's Disease Society of America as manager of youth and community services. I started getting involved volunteering within the HD community about 10 years ago. I wear multiple different hats. So I started getting involved volunteer-wise after my mom had passed away. And then shortly after started working at a long-term care facility on an HD-specific unit as the program manager, and then started working at HDSA. So coming from all different perspectives of this topic, so.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Pessy. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm also a social worker and a PhD student right now. Fingers crossed we get there. I got involved with the HD community back in 2016 when my mom was diagnosed with HD. She was adopted, so none of us knew that this existed in our family, so it was all brand new to us. 3 months after my mom tested, I went through not the best process of getting tested just because we didn't know that there were steps to take. We didn't know about the Center of Excellence. So I tested positive 3 months after my mom. So I have a daughter who's at risk. She's now 6, and I have a brother and sister still at risk as well. I found the NYA after our trauma with our local neurologist and the testing and everything that happened, and attended my first Pittsburgh NYA retreat and dove in, and I've been on the NYA board for 5 years now. So happy to have everybody here.
Yeah, thank y'all. And yeah, what we've found is that people come in and out of their involvement, and that might be true for you too. Okay, so I'm looking at the app, and there's people asking if there's a video. Maybe the video just wasn't started yet. So if you're at home, if you can put a message that yes, you can see us or not. So elephant in the room, we are going to, yeah, that would be great. Yes, please. Here's our disclaimer. The information is part of the convention for informational use only. We encourage all attendees to consult with their providers and let us know if you have questions. And then, we're asking folks to wear masks. And then ask all your questions through the app. Okay, so we all know what this means, right? The elephant in the room is this strange idiom. And so here's a social worker with the elephant who is like, we're not talking about it. People aren't acknowledging me. And I think, when we thought about this topic, the elephant in the room is HD, but there's a lot to it. So I would love to hear y'all's thoughts in your personal experiences, and then we can definitely share, working as social workers, what are the different elements that you see?
Yeah, so I would say my elephant in the room is being positive with HD, but not symptomatic yet. My mom is still alive. She's not in the late stages, but definitely getting there. Her speech and her walking has gotten worse over the past couple of years, but because my mom is symptomatic with HD, she is the one with HD. So even though I've been tested and I'm positive and I'm living in my reality of being positive and the struggles every day of having to worry about my future, worry about everything I'm doing, how it's going to impact me, my goals, no one else around me in my life is feeling what I feel because I'm not physically symptomatic yet. So it's really difficult because I'm internalizing this by myself. And when, I talk to my friends and family about, having conversations, ask me about HD, I want to talk about it. It's, if you're having a good day, I don't want to bring it up. well, in the reality, HD might not always be at the front of my brain, but it's always in this nugget in the back. So it's not something that is just coming out of the blue because it's my reality every day. So I think that's kind of my elephant. So it's been difficult because even after conversation, it's my mom's the focus because she's physically sick right now.
Yeah, HD is obviously the biggest elephant, right? Initially. And then there's so many other components that go along with that. I remember when my mom was diagnosed talking about it initially. I was young. I was only 10 when she was diagnosed, but was showing symptoms way before that. She wasn't the first person in our family diagnosed, so it was definitely, we were well aware of the disease within our family, but because there was no one that was we were caring for at the time, it wasn't spoken about, except that, her father and her sister had passed away before I was born from this. And then when my mom was diagnosed, after that initial conversation, I don't think I said out loud that my mother had Huntington's disease till I was 19. So I hid it from friends and people that I cared about, that cared about me. It was just something like, it felt like forbidden fruit or something, like we weren't allowed to say it or acknowledge it. We all knew what was going on and that she was progressing. She was in a long-term care facility, but we just couldn't say it, right? Or things that were happening and things that we were planning for. Then the next elephant was testing. Then the next elephant was what's gonna happen after my mom passes. So the elephant kept changing, but it all surrounded that HD, right? And then after she passed, the other things just continued to take that place. And the elephant kept getting bigger, smaller, and then everything in between, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Nope, I saw my own.
Sorry, I
picture.
forgot. And everybody can see us at home. Hey.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's exactly what I think about, is just that the elephant changes, and what it is for you might not be the same as for someone else. And remind me, how old were you when your mom got diagnosed? Because you were, it was like...
Yeah, so I was 10 when she was diagnosed. She was probably showing symptoms, they say, like 5 to 10 years before that. But she wasn't diagnosed till I was 10, and then I remember the first time I said it out loud, and it was to a group of medical students that, my mom has Huntington's disease, and it was the first time I said it out loud. So it was a really impactful moment too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about, Ashley saying how that's with her every day. Like, was there a day that you didn't think about it?
No, I thought about it every day, and I just didn't actively say it.
Yeah. And so when I think about that, it's just so lonely,
But, and my family, we were all very supportive of one another, and me and my sister, was always, I sort of took on that motherly role at a young age as well, but even before I even knew it, right? But we didn't say it, we just knew what was going on. So it wasn't just discussed. We never discussed, mom is sick, what's gonna happen next, how are we gonna plan? It was just, we're just gonna, our backs against the wall, we're just gonna deal with what's going on right now, be present.
Yeah. Do you have something else?
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting because being that we found out about it, I was 22 when we found out. So my brother was 19 and my sister was 16 when we found out. So for us, it was brand new. I lived 22 years of my life not knowing and had this world dropped on me. But the reality of it, I didn't understand what Huntington's disease was and what that meant of getting that test and how my life was going to change forever, because I didn't understand the severity of what it was because of how we were brought or educated on it originally. Like my neurologist said very made up things that we listened to because we didn't know any better. So things about my daughter's biracial. She has less of a chance of getting Huntington's. They did a cognitive test on me 5 minutes after I got my results. She did, and I kind of remember it as a blur, and it was the left side of your body's lagging because of your diabetes and your Huntington. Like all of these bizarre things that we believed for months until we found HDSA. So we were very open to tell everybody my mom had Huntington's. But to your point, I remember the first time somebody said I did, and it stuck with me. We were at camp, and we made these boats, and it was for your heroes. And my sister made one for me and my mom. And I'm like, oh, that's so nice. She made me a boat. And then she got up there and said, I made these boats for my mom and my sister who have Huntington's disease. And it was the first moment that it was ever acknowledged that, I had it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Inspirational.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we don't talk about it, because it's hard. It's protective to not talk about it. So I will give you an earworm at this point. I love this subject. Okay, so everyone gets the joke, right? Do I need to explain it? Anybody? Okay. So, I mean, in this family and in Encanto, they're not talking about a particular family member, and I think sometimes that does happen for the person that has HD or is at risk. But in this context, I'm really just thinking about all the very many things that we don't talk about. So don't talk about someone being at risk, don't talk about, the emotion, there's just so much that isn't acceptable. And then we get these messages from one another. So if we try to, a lot of times, people can be shut down. Literally that scene, she's putting her finger over his mouth. The water is a goner, I'm sorry. Okay, so, I mean, I think this is just so common. And I think we live it in lots of ways, even if you don't have HD in your life, because it's how we as humans cope, right? So we use strategies to manage our negative emotions, to deal with stress. And we can do that in a positive way or in a negative way or somewhere in between. Sometimes we do both multiple times a day. It's just coping, right? And so that not talking about it is a defense mechanism. That idea was, came up with by Freud and then his daughter, and that was a long time ago. It's a little outdated, but there's still some truth in it, in that this unconscious way of defending ourselves, of keeping ourselves safe. We're just trying to protect ourselves. And sometimes that includes trying to protect our family members and our loved ones, right? So it's normal, but as you might imagine, as we know, if there's too much, it becomes problematic. So there's lots of different defense mechanisms. I'm going to introduce them, but we're not going to belabor it. But the big one I think that we see, is denial, right? We're just not going to talk about it. We're not going to name it. Even though it's there and we're coping with it, we're just going to refuse to accept it. We're going to block it out. Repression is when you don't even realize it's so unconscious. And then there's lots of other ones that you can look at later. But just for you to know, there's lots of different ways that we as humans try to keep ourselves okay. So, avoidance. That's what we're talking about. I found this great little study. It was only 10 people in Scotland. It was, a qualitative study. But what I liked about it, because we weren't really sure how many panelists we might have, and I wanted to be prepared with people's stories, is that there were a lot of quotes. So this was a study with caregivers, which they call carers in Scotland. And I just wanted to share these with you. So, we never spoke about HD, never spoke about that. The kids never knew. I think this is really normal for a lot of HD families. Talking about her spouse, he wouldn't talk about it at all. It was difficult to find anyone to talk to in the family. Sometimes we hear that members of the family, siblings and their, spouses and children, they just lose contact because they're coping differently. It just creates this divide. I put it in a little box in the back of my mind because really I was hoping that she wouldn't have it. And that's how we get through day to day, And then sometimes people are angry with him and his dad. I suppose I wanted to protect my children. And so I really wanted to share this because I think that sometimes, working with youth who have HD in their family, they can get really mad and frustrated with their adults for not telling them generationally. And I just want to say, I understand why that's not okay, and they're doing it a lot of times out of protection. It's both, right? The implications for my children, that's the hardest thing. I don't cope with it. People are terrified for their children. We didn't talk about it. This is sort of what Ashley was talking about. They know their dad's ill, it's going to get worse, and they know that they're probably at risk of getting it as well, and to me that's enough for them to be getting on with. We didn't talk about it because for me, that would just pile it on. So if you know someone's at risk, if you know someone has tested positive, if you know that they're symptomatic, maybe we don't need to bring it up because they shouldn't have to think about that. Like, if I don't bring it up, it's not in the back of their mind, but it totally is. My eldest has been tested and is positive, but she doesn't want anyone to know. I wonder how she feels. So this is her daughter. She wonders how she feels, but she doesn't know. She won't talk about it. I think she has hidden it away. I think these are just really poignant and representative, even though it was a really small study, of what I know of how people have coped. And then the study, goes on to say HD affects whole families for generations. It affects all aspects of life. Family breakdown frequently occurs. Secrecy can be so great that it becomes impossible to discuss the subject within the family. And then each member lives in isolation with their own feelings about the disease. So that's where it's like this lonely feeling, because even if two members of the same family have maybe the same gene status, they each are going to cope in their own way. That might be wonderful and everyone can move on with their lives for some people, and for other people, it still is such a big part of their life, even if they test negative, So here's what I'm thinking, is that we can't change other people. And so when we're talking about the elephant in the room, and if you're here and you're thinking about this, we can't make other people talk about it, but you can think about yourself. And that is, that's what we're going to talk about. So back to coping, right? So there's these coping strategies. It's just thoughts or actions used to manage the unpleasant situation. And usually, unlike the defense mechanisms, it's a direct approach, right? Like, what you're doing, you're being purposeful about it. You can be focused on the problem. And some things with HD, you can actually do something about the problem, right? Like, we can get someone some medication, or we can get them some resource. But the problem of HD itself, we can't do anything about, right? And that's where it gets overwhelming. So then we can look at emotion-focused coping. And so that's, purposefully managing your negative feelings, your thinking, but through thinking and acting, and that's when you can't change it. So here's where, here we go. So let's talk about feelings. Isn't that fun? I know. Okay, so the Gottmans are this couple who, they do marriage research. They do, couples research, but a lot of it is really applicable just to being human. So here's this feelings wheel that their colleague developed at the Gottman Institute. Have you seen this before? Yes, no? Okay. It's handy. So where do you think you start? The middle, yes. So you start simply. So think about some part of your life, whether that's an HD part or not, and this feeling that you have. Where in the middle would it land? So do we want to do an example? Are y'all feeling it? Is it okay? You want to go through it?
Yeah.
We feeling right now?
Yeah, is that all right?
Right now? Oh, gosh. Okay.
I can do it if it's too
No,
much.
it's okay. I'm trying to cheat.
Yeah, cheat. It's okay. This
I'm
is,
trying to
again,
cheat.
self-protective. This is coping. You don't have to dive in front of, all the people.
No, it's okay.
Pick one that's...
Okay. I feel like I'm feeling peaceful. And that moves into feeling thoughtful and content. But then I think it kind of moves to thankful towards the end, is how I'm feeling right now. Even though I'm anxious, but I don't.
Well, yeah, so that's the thing, is you're not going to just have the one feeling.
So then
right?
scared, yeah.
So it's all available all at once, right? And you're going to have multiple feelings. You're not going to have all of them at the same time.
Yeah.
But that's why it feels overwhelming. That's why we get flooded with our emotion, right? Because we're knocked back by it. And I think that's why a tool like this is helpful, because you can look at and maybe start to identify what some of those are.
Mm-hmm. You want to do it?
Yeah. Okay, I'm so many of these. Oh, this is tough. Okay.
90%.
So right now I'm peaceful, but also scared. How am I crying with this feeling wheel already? So
Sorry,
peaceful.
I'm so sorry.
I am feeling loving and thankful to be here. And it's just been such an amazing, just already couple days being with everyone. I'm scared, and it makes me anxious and also insignificant.
Here, I'm gonna do. Oh, I don't need the microphone. But yeah, I was just looking at that too. So like, I feel scared. I feel anxious because I want this to be helpful to y'all. So what if what if I would be foolish or embarrassed? What if this isn't resonating for y'all and it's not helpful and I've wasted your time? And like being at a conference like this is in some ways really a happy thing because you see people that you might not have seen in a while. You can reconnect with people, you can make new friends, and so it's joyful. It can be exciting, it can be stimulating, and then that also and delightful, and that also can feel overwhelming, right? And then it's hard because sometimes when you see people at these kinds of events, you can feel sad because you can feel lonely in the middle of the crowd. You can feel mad if you don't like how things are going. So there's just so much to it. And I bring this all to you to say, like, when we're thinking about the elephant in the room, a lot of times to me that's like pointing my finger at someone else that's refusing to talk about it, right? And so I don't know if you've seen, like, when you point your finger at someone else, you have more fingers pointing back at yourself. I know, it's awful. I hate it, and it's so true. Yeah. Yes, you over there. So I hate to tell you the bad news that you got to look at your own feelings if you're going to start talking about it. Because if you just start talking about it with pointing those fingers at someone else, but there's a lot pointing back at yourself, you're probably going to end up in some of these defense mechanisms, right? Like projection. Like you might tell your sibling, you're avoiding all of this, when actually there's probably some parts that you might be avoiding. You might be, in denial about some things. You might be taking it out on someone. You might realize, like, you're expecting someone else to talk about something that's really hard, but you're not having that conversation with your own child, right? So I know it's bad news. The good news is that it starts with you, is that it's empowering. It's your choice, and you get to do it on your own timeline and hopefully be mindful and deliberate about it. But oh my gosh, that's a lot of work for you. I know, it's hard. Okay, so thinking about feelings, you can Google this. The Gottman Institute has it available. I'm a social worker. I bought it on a pillow. You can do that too. It's helpful. Then there's other tools like this. So, a lot of times these are designed, this is like your thermometer for your feelings. A lot of times these are designed for children, but oh my gosh, we need it too. Adults need it too, because we can feel those feelings and start to identify what they are, but we also need to think about the intensity, and that changes throughout the day and over time as well. I know, it's a lot of work. Okay. And then there's this cognitive triangle. Either of you want to take that on? So this is part of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's just, working to, so there's, I'll describe it. So it's again, just working through your thoughts and feelings and behavior. So at the top is your thoughts, right? And then there's how you feel and how you act. And those are all interrelated, right? So someone throw out, do you want to, a thought? I can come up with one if you don't. What's a thought? Well, that scared is a feeling. What's a thought? A thought is,
I think my life will be over if I have HD.
okay. If I think that my life is going to be over if I have HD, so I'm thinking about testing, my life's going to be over. How does that make me feel? Scared? Mad? Sad? Discouraged? Furious? bewildered, hopeless, anxious. Yeah. And what's that? Jealous. Yeah. So if we're thinking, if I test, my life's going to be over, and then I'm feeling this wave of emotion, a lot of it, right? I'm going to be feeling it probably pretty intensely. How is that going to change how I act? Take it out on other people. Negative.
Find other ways to control.
Get real controlling about something else. I'm going to just, focus on this thing over here instead, right? And those are all normal coping skill mechanisms. Some of them are skills and when you're being mindful about it, and some of them are not. Nothing is terrible. It just is what it is until it starts to affect you negatively. And then maybe we need to look at it, right? I know. This isn't what I thought I was going to talk about either. I'm sorry. I thought we were just going to talk about how everyone else is so terrible. And then, what do you know? It's us, right? So, if you haven't seen this before, does this make sense? Yeah, it just interacts. And so then, when we act differently, that changes how we think, too. It kind of reinforces. So, again, that's the good news and the bad news is that we can, see that interaction and start to change the pattern. So if what I'm thinking about testing positive is that my life would be over, what if I start to challenge that idea? What if I start to think about it differently? My life will be over, but what also could happen? I wake up the next day and really nothing has changed except my understanding of it? Like in reality? Did my life end? No, hopefully not. What else? If I change the way that I think about it.
I think, like how you said, people think like, oh, my life is over. My life has like no meaning. I can't do this. I can't do that. But then, like I used to think that too. But then I see other people, and I'm like, their life isn't over. Their life has meaning. Their life has purpose. Why do we think that about other people, but we can't think that about ourselves? Like, we need to flip the script and also love and support ourselves, and that's really hard.
I think I need to give you the mic. I was going to try to just repeat what you said, but I think I'm just going to give you the mic, if you don't mind.
It's like we're our worst critics, and we love and support everyone, and we're so proud of everyone, but we just can't redirect that to ourselves and love ourselves and believe in ourselves, and that's like really hard to do. Like, my sister does like all these things and she doesn't believe it about herself and I believe it for her, but it's like, but then I feel the same way about myself and I'm giving her like all this advice and I'm like, but Sonia, you don't do that for yourself either.
Right.
Like, you don't tell yourself like, oh, go back to school, you can do it, like you can do that. It's just like, and then in my head I'm like, no, you can't do that, you're not good enough to do that, you don't deserve to do that.
But those are just thoughts,
Yeah.
and you don't have to believe them. You can challenge them, just like you're saying that you can challenge them for your sister, right? That therapist heal thyself thing we experience sometimes. Like we're telling people, like as a social worker, oh, but this and that, and oh, like, wow, that's really great advice. That would be great if I took it too. I mean, we're all human, right? Thank you, Sonia. Nice to see you. So I know these are just like tried and true and obnoxious. I hate it. And also they're effective. So, you can come back and look at it. Were you going to say something, Marianne? No? Okay. All right. Here's more. Have you heard of this idea? The wise mind. So this is more getting into, so I'm using this tool called Therapist Aid. It has these great handouts, so you can go look at them too. So this is more getting into like a Buddhist approach. Like it doesn't have to be a religious thing, but just a viewpoint. So the idea is that you have an emotional mind, a wise mind, and a reasonable mind. So your feelings and your thoughts, right? So the emotional mind is when when feelings control your actions and behavior, and then the reasonable mind is when have you heard someone say, like, you're intellectualizing everything? Like, you can talk about it, blah, 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 but you're not actually expressing your feelings about it? Yeah. So the wise mind is the balance between the two, right? So I think this, where you find the balance between the thinking and the feeling, to hopefully find what's right for you, I think has a connection to this cognitive behavioral theory, right? So I'm just introducing ideas. You can come back to it. I know it's like a lot, but it's just something to think about your thinking, think about your feeling, so that you can get ready to actually talk about the thing, right? Another idea is radical acceptance. So here's the situation. You find out that you were not selected for a job when you felt that you were the best candidate. So you might typically think, it's not fair. I was the best one, I did everything right. They can't do this to me, right? What emotion is in there? Anger. Sad, you can cry. Oh, pride. Yes, pride.
Maybe you're feeling like, oh, I think I was the best, but maybe they're right. I wasn't.
Oh, okay. So I thought I was the best, but then now this is creating some doubt. This is scary.
What was I doing wrong for them not to consider
What?
me?
Yeah, what did I do wrong?
Should I have been doing more?
Yeah.
I wasn't bringing enough. As
I didn't do enough. It's the self-blame and shame. Yeah. So this, I think of it as sort of like, you can go the long journey or you can just like bounce over, right? So like, I know this water cup is just, okay. So it's just this like jump over instead of like, okay, I'm gonna work on this. It's just like, nope, I'm just gonna accept what it is. You did that? You wanna talk about it?
Yeah, so I feel like that was my approach to HD because I went to one event and then one convention, and after convention, I'm like, I gotta do this, I have to do this, I have to be a part of this. And that was my way of coping, was to jump in and be as active in the community as I can because that's how I cope, is being involved. But now, and I was gonna bring this up earlier, I don't know if I've truly dealt with my diagnosis yet. Like, I still haven't worked through that yet. And I'm
Sure.
very afraid to when I get to that point because I didn't take a more like drawn out approach to kind of work through it. I dove in and now I just feel like creeping up. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of
It's coming for you.
Yeah. And I'm very scared
Yeah.
for that to happen.
Yeah.
Of that actual situation with you. So I remember when Ashley was at her first NYA retreat, and she's like afterwards, "What can I do? Can I join something? Can I do this?" And I was like, "Why don't you just go to your first convention and just like go to sessions, meet other people?" "No, I have to do everything." And I was trying to control, like making sure that she was able to process, because that's what I did too. I jumped in head first. And I knew the impact that it had on me, and I didn't want her to see her do the same thing. So I was trying to control you, but meanwhile, she's didn't do anything I said.
Her own person. It's so inconvenient.
Exactly. I can't control her as I can't control myself either. But
But I think I was going to say to the point of like therapy, like you said, we tell everybody to go to therapy because it's such an important tool. I am not going to therapy. I am not ready to go to therapy, but I'll say also like there's a lot of HD wasn't, so me and my mom have a very, I wouldn't say strained. There was a lot of trauma before the HD.
Sure.
Me and my mom's relationship isn't the way it is because of Huntington's disease. It was because of everything before. So I've gone to therapy before, and it's like we just dove in, and then all of these things that I've hidden away have been triggered. So I know I should talk to somebody, but I'm not mentally ready to go farther back to my childhood, and that's really hard because I want to.
Yeah.
But I know where I'm at in my life right now. It is not the right time for me to go to therapy.
That's exactly what I was thinking, is that, a lot of times like, oh, go to therapy, just, and you have to kind of be ready, and that's what I'm saying with this too, is you have to be ready before you try to have those difficult conversations. You have to get in a place where you're like, yes, I can do the work. Otherwise, you're just going to freak out, right? And maybe that's okay, but that's hard. And so, maybe you can take these smaller steps. And so maybe it is doing some of this work at home, or even just meditating, or, just doing smaller steps until you feel like you can take the larger steps. But the radical acceptance, I think, is really powerful, but it also has that danger of like, okay, I'm just going to accept it and move on. And so I'm going to read what it is. So it's frustrating. I didn't get the job, but I accept that they felt someone else would be a better fit. So, okay, I'm not going to like belabor this. I'm just going to work on accepting that this is what it is. And so you can do that. You can, take that in as your reality, and that you still have the feelings.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's creeping up because, so I found out in grad school that I was positive with Huntington. So I kind of went through a little spell of like, why am I doing any of this? None of this is worth it. So then my next step was, I know I wanted to get my PhD, but I thought I was going to do that in my 50s. Like that was the goal, to go back and retire and teach and do things. And then I dove into my PhD. So right from undergrad to grad school to PhD program, and I've hit a wall right now where I don't know why I'm doing this. And I'm stuck because I feel all of this, because my reasons were, I'm going to get this done and I'm going to achieve all these goals and I'm going to be great and I'm going to set this amazing role model for my daughter that she could do everything and, this will never stop her. But I've hit a wall where I'm not motivated. I don't know why I'm doing it anymore. And I've lost my energy because I literally, to your point, I've dove into everything in my life after finding out about HD because I'm so scared I'm not going to be able to accomplish what I had set for myself. So I know it's coming.
Yeah.
I feel it.
And I think, we also have to acknowledge the context that we're living in, right? So like we all have been through a pandemic and there's been lots of trauma in lots of ways, right? Over the last few years. And so I think there's a lot of people who are reevaluating. And, the goal that you set for yourself however many years ago might be absolutely the right thing for you, but it also might not be. And it's also okay to consider that. But it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to, take that time and think about it. Marion, are there comments from people at home that we should discuss?
To do Q&A at the end.
We
There's just
can, whatever you think based on what you've seen.
I think because it's not specifically
Got it.
on where we're at, so I think we'll send your questions through the app if you have throughout, so you don't forget them, but we'll answer questions at the end. Does that sound good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, these are just tools that I'm presenting as options for you to kind of get in your good place before you start trying to talk about the hard stuff. So then there's also self-soothing. So there's this 5 senses activity. This one, it doesn't say it exactly, but you can focus on what do you see, right? If you're freaking out especially, you can focus, okay, what do I see? What am I hearing? What am I touching? I feel the ground under me. What am I tasting? Okay, breakfast. Or whatever, what am I smelling? The person next to me should have had deodorant on. This other person has too much perfume, whatever. But it gets you back to your current reality, to the here and now, the things that you feel and see, and can help you soothe yourself when you're feeling completely overwhelmed and flooded.
I use this all the time, just saying. I like to run and hike and things like that, and I often get a lot of anxiety and even sometimes like panic attacks or anxiety attacks during, and I use this tool wherever I am. And it really does just keep you in the present moment.
Okay, there's more tools. I'm sure that, we could go on and on, but let's talk about this. Okay, so now you're ready to have the talk. Yes? The talk. It's not going to be just one talk, is it? I'm so sorry. I wish that it was. It would be so much easier. Just rip that Band-Aid off and be done and move on with your life. But as y'all were saying earlier, the elephant changes through time. And so what we're talking about or not talking about changes as well. So once you did start talking with your family, was it a talk? Was there a big talk and then we just never talked about it again? Or do you feel comfortable talking about that?
Yeah. So it was never that I had a talk with my family. So it was just that I decided on my own to start getting involved with a couple of other people I met in the community, a couple of family members. We did a fundraiser. We went to a walk together. And then when I sort of dove in head first, I want to go to everything. I want to do everything possible for this community, for myself, for my family. And, my family was, we want to go to a walk, but that's it, and like, we want to be involved, but not like you, So it was always really difficult. I'm like, why not? Like, why don't you want to be obsessed with everything? And be completely in control of this, or try to, or what I thought was being in control. So it was definitely never like a specific talk, but it was just like opening it up, opening the conversation, that it's okay to start having that conversation. And I remember, don't want to cry. I remember, I'm good. It's, when I started getting really involved and doing a lot of different things for the NYA and for young people impacted by HD, and it was really because I felt so alone and isolated growing up around it, even though I did have an amazing family and support network. But because they were trying to protect me, it felt a little bit like I couldn't talk about it. And I was trying to protect them, right? And I wanted to control that for them, and because I was going to save them and be their superhero, right? But so when I did start getting involved and started sharing my experiences and my story with different community members, my uncle had said to me, like, thank you for opening up so much and being so brave, because I was never able to do that. And it really, he did so much in his own way to like support and protect me and my family, that he didn't need to, but this was my way of trying to do the same for him and for other people in my family. So, yeah, it was never one talk. Moral of the story.
I wish it was. It's fine. Yeah. So there's this other idea of like, if you're in a dark room and there's an elephant and there's multiple people touching the elephant and they can't see it, they would have different ideas of what it is, right? So, this is sort of an Asian interpretation where it comes from. So if you're touching the trunk, it's a piece of bamboo, and if you're touching the tail, it's a snake. And so, you're all touching the same thing, but you have these very different perspectives, right? And so when we're thinking about talking about HD, I just think like my experience of it, your experience of it, all of us are having these very different experiences of it, depending on who we are, what we've, had in our own lifetime, our beliefs. I think it's really important when you start thinking about approaching, I'm going to say your family members about this, they might see it really differently than you do. And there's a lot of different reasons that they might, So when we think about other people in your family and how they approach it differently, is there anything that stands out for you?
I can just use an example recently that happened. I was sharing a story with a couple of my family members that I recall happening, I'm not going to age myself, a long time ago. But, and I'm sharing how I experienced, and they were like, that's not what happened. And I'm like, but that's how it happened to me, right? Yeah. And that's how I perceived it and my experience with it and my feelings around it. And trying to just remind others of that too. And vice versa, remembering like the way I'm viewing something or perceiving something or how I'm coping with something, we can't expect others to do the same. So even when, I was younger, I wanted to be super involved in my mom's care and things like that, and other family members were more timid or they couldn't approach it in the same way. And I would get angry initially, and it wasn't until later on that I realized that that was just their way of coping. And I feel guilty all the time still for like getting angry about certain things, but it was just their way of coping. My expectations for them were the same as they were for me, and I can't do that, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say, me and my brother and sister, we all have dealt with the Huntingtons completely different. And like Marianne taking care of her sister, I was the parent to my brother and sister growing up. My mom was there, but she really wasn't. And even before the symptoms, there, again, a lot of trauma. So I raised my brother and sister. So I was very protective, very overstepping. Like even to this day, they keep telling me, you're only my sister, you're not my mom. And it's so hard for me to think like that because they were my first kids. And, when my goal was to dive in and take this by the horn head on, where my sister was like, okay, I'll come around here and there, and my brother wanted nothing to do, nothing at all. It was hard because I'm like, this is the right way to do it. Come to these things, come to the NYA, be in the community, come to convention. It helped me, it's gonna help you. And then I had to take a step back about a year and a half ago, and I said, their story is not my story. And it kind of came out of nowhere. I was just walking, and I kind of stopped, and I just had this thought of, I have to let them do them and figure it out. But it's been so difficult. And, you know, like to the thing with the care with the mom, you know, we've all taken different roles, and they might not all fit together in my brain, but they're working, and it's moving, and things are happening, and it's, you know, been good because I have, to your point of going to see, you know, your sick loved one, I can't go see my mom. I can't see her alone, because my trauma of my childhood is I love my mom and I want to take care of my mom, but she couldn't take care of me. So I have a lot of things, so I can't do it. But my sister has stepped up, and she knows that if we go, we have to go together, or she can do more things. My brother's been getting a little bit better. So we've been able to make this dynamic work with all three of us. And instead of like getting angry now, it's just, okay, I'm gonna step over here a little bit and help you, because next time I need help, you're gonna step over and help me. But it's taken a while to get to this point, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, when I hear that, what I hear is that you've done a lot of work to get to that point. And that's hard. That takes years, right? Like, and then we have to keep doing it. Again, it's so unfair. I really hate it. And so I think when you choose to do your own work in your own time, in the way that makes sense for you, then you can show up to these conversations in a better way, and also respect that your loved ones are going to have to do their work in their way, just like Ashley had that realization. And so if you can hear us saying it, hear me saying it, and fall back on that when you're frustrated, when you're disgusted that they're not showing up in the way that you want them to, and realize that they are coping with this too. You're coping with it too. And, you know, if we look at each other and point those fingers, we're not going to actually spend our time together in a way that is probably how we want it to be, in a way that where we come together and express the love that we have for one another, right? Like, we're mad at each other because we love each other and want the best for them, and what they want isn't the best. It's what I want, right? So it's just complicated. And I think if you can remember this image of, like, we just all have different perspectives, and they're not wrong. It's just different, which is so inconvenient. Okay. So we're still talking about having the talk, which is multiple talks, right? You gotta breathe. Because what happens when you start thinking about having this difficult conversation? I hold my breath immediately. Do you hold your breath? Do you feel it? Okay, close your eyes. Imagine having the talk. What do you feel in your body? Just think about it. Feel the sensations. For me, my throat starts closing up, and my chest gets tight, and my palms might get sweaty, and I just don't breathe. Like, it just all closes up. And then if you show up like that, how is it going to look? How's it going to go? Here are my fists, right? It's not going to go well. And so the power of breathing and getting your body to tell your brain that you're okay is something that you can harness. You know, so really looking at breathing exercises. Y'all know there's so many apps. Do you have them and not use them too? That's what I do. Okay. But they're out there. And if you want to go about having these difficult conversations, really getting yourself physically calm so that you can be emotionally calm to show up in the way that you want is going to be helpful to you and to your loved ones. I love this clarity thing that's not clear. So I also think that if you're coming at it, you're doing your own work, you're getting yourself ready, I think you got to get clear on what it is you're trying to accomplish, you know? Because if you just go in with all the resentment from your childhood and all the everything, it's not going to go well, and you're not going to actually accomplish your goal because you don't know what your goal is. So if you can think through, talk to someone, journal, whatever, go for a run. Find ways of getting clarity for yourself of what you're trying to get out of those conversations and have a very small achievable goal. You're probably going to have a much better chance of achieving it than all of the mess, right? So what would be like a small goal that you might have in starting to talk about the unspeakable? Sonia?
My thing is like, I still get like so angry and so frustrated. It's like, because I'm like.
Hold on, Sonia. Okay, so you get angry.
I get like really angry and really frustrated about like everything pretty much nowadays. And it's been that way for a while now because like I'm so used to doing everything. And then when I like ask someone to like do something or do this and they don't do it and I get like more upset. And I used to like just like start like talking and taking it out. And then after I'm done doing that, I'm done like crying or saying something hurtful that I didn't mean to say, but it was just like happened in the moment. I like would go, like you go away and you like sit on it and think about it and you feel like so bad. It's just like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that. So like what I try to do now, and I'm still not good about it, my siblings can say, is like when we're about to start like an argument, I literally am just like standing there. I'm like, and I'm like letting out like all this air and they can hear me and they're like, what's wrong? And I'm like, nothing, don't worry about it. And I do that and I make that noise and like I think they could tell like I want to yell and say something, and then I just like literally go to my room and I'm just sitting there for moments and I'm like, just don't come in. Let me have my moment. And it's like, and then I like can like breathe and calm down. And then I don't take it out because then they'll like ruin the whole day. It'll like ruin my mood and stuff like that. And it's like when I see it after calming down and like realizing it's not that big of a deal, I don't need to be like upset about it, I can like approach it better to like go away, think about it and be like, okay, actually, you know what? I shouldn't do that. They didn't mean to do that. We can do it better. Let's like come back together. If I have to do it myself, it's fine. It's better that way anyways. Like it's better because it's the way I want it to be done, so I might as well do it. But I think it's just like, it's better to like stop, think, breathe, and decide how you want to go about it. Because if not, like I know it's really hard on them, and it's hard for me to like, I want to check up on them and support them, but like Ashley said, you're just now realizing like they're not looking at it the same way as you are. They're not approaching about it, and everybody takes their own time coming to terms with stuff. So I try not to push them anymore, but also that's like my job as an older sister and someone who's always had to like care for them. But I'm like, it's time for them to like care for themselves, but it's hard to do that, to not want to do everything for them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I hear you being very deliberate and mindful about the way you're approaching it.
Can I just?
Yeah.
And Sonia, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing. And I want you to know you're not the only one that does that. My family calls me the light switch. I'm either super happy or very angry. But it takes a long time, or fetal position crying, one or the other. But very extremes. And it took a long time for me to get to the place of being able to stop and think about before reacting, right? And that I'm taking maybe my anger or frustration out on them, and it has nothing to do with them. And it might actually, but maybe that's not the right approach. And trying to see it from their perspective.
Yeah. So
Took a long time.
Here's some of those tips. So we're back to the Gottman Institute has these tips for soft startups. So here are some ideas of if you're going to have that difficult conversation, how to do it in a way that it gives you the best, foot forward, set you up for success, even though it may not go the way you want. So starting the conversation in a calm moment. Like we know this, but like Sonia's example, when she's mad because of whatever, that's not really the time to make the other people talk about the thing, right? Like it's not going to go well. You're going to be angry. They're going to be defensive. Everyone's going to be mad. And then thinking about your body language and your tone of voice, right? So like we can say the same words, but if we deliver them differently. It's going to be received differently. So just, again, speaking calmly, getting yourself in a calm state before you start that conversation. Using I statements. Everyone knows it, right? I statements, we still forget. But, talking from your own perspective instead of pointing fingers at what they're doing, right? Really identifying the problem clearly. That's where I'm saying clarity for yourself, being clear with the other person of this small, attainable goal, and then just being respectful, using respectful language, which, for whatever reason, sometime with our families, those are the people we feel like we don't have to be polite to.
I feel like because they're going to be there.
They're going to forgive us. It's fine.
They have to. They love us. No
Yeah,
matter what.
exactly. Unconditional love. But then we're hurting them by, Okay, so again, here's a Gottman, slide. So ways to have better conflict, because this is a conflict, right? They're not wanting to talk about it and you're pushing, right? So accept repair attempts. We're going to talk about that next. Practice those soft startups that we just talked about. Protect, this is partner, but whoever that you're speaking with, protect their triggers. I don't have a slide on that, but basically it's just, if you know that there's a particular vulnerability that the person's going to get really sad about or really angry about, maybe you need to be gentle with that, right? Like, not put your finger in that wound and like just being gentle about it. Focus on that issue. Again, the clarity that's not clear, but, and then using the I statements. So here's repair attempts. So here's some language that you can use. I need to be calmer right now. Can I take that back? I know that isn't your fault. I understand. I'm sorry. Thank you for sharing this with me. So here's some language that you can use. And it's just a skill to remember what they are. I mean, you could print it off and put it on the wall and point at it. But these are just some strategies to use. And then there's this, right? Just every time. It's so annoying. So if you can come back to, maybe a little bit more realistic expectations, it's probably going to make it easier on you and them, right? So you're having that little bitty conversation, the small one, we're being strategic about it, we're being calm. Okay, so we have the conversation, we expected it to go well, it didn't do that, right? Ugh, so obnoxious. Then you have feelings again. So annoying. But you can feel them and do those other steps that we talked about to get yourself in a good place and think about what that next attempt with the conversation might look like. Okay, so the other thing you can do, people may not ever want to talk to you about this, right? So that's why y'all are here. Because there might be a family member that they just, in order to protect themselves, they're never going to really engage in this conversation. And they might set that boundary. And you might end up needing to respect it. And so you need to know that this resource is here for you. Other people, support groups, social workers, neurologists, all of the people are here. And maybe you get that need fulfilled with a different relationship. And then, oh my gosh, you're going to feel sad and frustrated and angry about that, right? But we're here. So I know there's comments and questions from home.
Yeah. So I'm going to read the first one. Why do you think we're so reluctant to discuss HD when we're in between generations and not currently suffering with the visible symptoms? Could that help with the elephant in the room once testing and symptoms come along?
Do you want to take that or you want me to?
You
Yeah.
want to start? And
Okay. So this is, why do you think you're reluctant to in between? I think honestly, from my perspective, people see it as the calm between the storms. We've been dealing with this. Okay, now that might be okay, and then there might be this other storm. We need to just breathe and take a vacation, and that is totally valid. And also, the next generation is probably still thinking about it. So your vacation might feel like denial to them.
And sometimes I think, and this came up actually over the last couple days with a few people, I'm not caring for anyone currently. Nobody, I'm not nobody's currently is symptomatic with Huntington's disease in my life right now. So why am I here? Because we're all impacted.
Yeah.
Just because you might not be physically caring for someone, we're all emotionally caring for ourselves.
Yes.
And we've been through something, right? And it impacts us on so many different levels of our lives forever, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
And fortunately in some ways too, because it teaches us so much about ourselves and our lives. So, yeah, that's really, like, that in between is so hard. Sometimes you don't know where you fit in, but that doesn't mean you don't fit in, and you're not alone in that feeling either.
Yeah. I think it goes back to figuring out what is right for you,
Yeah.
and that's going to change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there was just here.
Above.
Yes, yeah. This one.
Okay.
Let me-
Being an outsider to the HD world, would you personally rather someone openly address the elephant and ask questions to learn more about your journey, or is it better to hold the conversation until it's brought up?
I love talking about HD, so I might be, I was actually, the other day, when I checked into my room, they felt bad because my door wasn't working, whatever. And all of a sudden, he was like, "Oh, why are you here?" I think he just felt bad and wanted to start a conversation. I was like, "Huntington's disease." He's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Yay!" Yeah, exactly. 40 minutes later, we're still talking about it and how I'm impacted and how it impacts me and the people that I care about and everybody that's here. And so for me, I'm okay with talking about it, but that's me. That's not everybody else. So some people, I feel like the person that, this friend, I think sometimes if you're more open about asking, just ask them if they're okay talking about it. I think that's easier to communicate rather than just assume that they're not or that they are.
They'll be able to set their own boundary with that, and that's what's really important in relationships is understanding and respecting those boundaries. So like Marianne, I will tell anybody who will listen, because like I said, when I found out, I had no idea. So I just feel like there's such a big gap with the education around HD. So anybody who asks me, we're going to talk. But it's also nice to not have to be the one to bring it up, because I feel like when we were first diagnosed, it was always me telling somebody, and like to the point was, it was that elevator speech, just Huntington's is this, and it just gets draining after a while.
And I think for an outside, I don't want to say outsider because you're still impacted, right? If you're a close friend or family, that's not directly. But I think that sometimes as the person that's impacted, they often feel bad saying something or telling you about what they might be feeling or going through, right?
That all the time. I was gonna say I go through that with all the time with like my friends and family, because I don't want to burden them with my feelings, so I don't really ever try to bring it up, because the thing is, HD is always going to be that consistent in my life, where my friend might have had a bad day, so like that's a right now thing, or my fiance, something might have happened with him and he's going to talk, but I could have been at home all day just down about just having a bad day with HD. Some days are definitely worse, but their day was worse because it happened in that moment, where this is every day for me that I deal with these feelings.
Yes, and, but because it is a constant, and you're going to have worse days and better days, and that's still valid too.
And that's why even initially we said, like, this elephant, sometimes it's really big and sometimes it's really little, and it changes in sizes and it changes in what that actual elephant is all the time.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, and I think for someone who is an outsider, I think just asking, I know this is something you're dealing with, you've told me about it, how can I be supportive to you? Do you want me to bring it up? Is there a magic word I can say so you can just tell me yes or no? Just asking what they want. And that, like those expectations is going to change. It's not going to be constant. Okay, so we have a question. Any tips for having conversations when you can't be in person? It's harder to bring these up when you don't see or talk to the person often and want to discuss in a calm setting and at a good time. So I think it's a few things. One, I think, again, it's like getting clear on what you're hoping to get out of the conversation and recognizing it's probably not going to just be one conversation. And then with that soft startup, it might be building that closeness, building that relationship a little bit more before you have the more difficult conversations. No? Okay. How do you determine who you share your story with? We have a whole PowerPoint on that. I think that you have to be mindful about it. You have to really, again, think for yourself what matters and what do you hope to get out of disclosing it. You know, so are we disclosing it to the stranger because we want to educate people about what HD is? Are we saying it to the childhood friend because we want them to know that this is something that's big in our life? You know, is it someone that we've started dating and then we have to figure out, like, are we going to tell them? When are we going to tell them? Oh my gosh. You know, I think it's being mindful and then connecting with others, whether it's, again, you know, a social worker or other people who have HD in their lives to strategize and to think about it. The hard part is it's up to you. And it's not going to always go the way you want. I think that might be all the questions on the app. Yes. Any other questions in person or comments? Go ahead.
I was wondering, like, how would you let your friends know, like, that you would like them to ask you questions, like, how you're doing, how can I help? Because, like, when my mom was first diagnosed, I remember we went to the genetic counselor and he told us that, but, like, at the time in, like, the Houston or Texas area, there was only a Parkinson's support group, and that's what the lady gave us information, like, about. She's like, but I feel like that won't really be beneficial to you. And then, you know, we just, like, took care of my mom as best as we could because there wasn't any way for us to get knowledge and stuff like that. And that's why I kind of joined the community later, because I didn't join until we really needed help and we weren't sure how to take care of her anymore based on what was happening. And, like, with your family, like you said, you don't want to burden them. You also don't want to talk to them about it because it could be triggering to them. And you're the oldest or, like, the one that's doing everything, and you don't want them to see that you're, like, struggling or, like, failing or not know what to do. And so, like, I wish my friends would have checked up on me and said, like, how can we help? What can I do? But it's also, like, you don't want to, like you said, interrupt what they're telling you, because then you don't want to be, like, the burden or, like, the star of the show when you're not at the same place in your life as they are in theirs, because you're dealing with totally something different. But I just don't know.
Okay, I'm going to try to summarize because I think the people at home can't hear you. So she was asking, how do you ask for the support that you need? How do you lean on people without feeling bad about it? And especially when, you know, you're the person that's supposed to be taking care of everyone else. And I think that, first of all, it's okay to ask. You know, like, people can say no. But you can tell your friends, like, I'm going through a really rough time right now, and it's going to be rough for a while. Can I count on you? Like, can we talk about it? And you can say, it's okay if this is too much for you. Like, can we talk once a week? Can you text me every day? You know, like, just seeing and negotiating what that is. And I think also sort of spreading the wealth of, like, oh, I have this friend and this person, stranger that I know online, and a therapist. And there's online, you know, Sonia, you were talking about not having access to support groups in the past, and now there's so much more online.
I was going to say something unique that me and my best friend did a couple years ago is we both have our own lives and our own stress and our own trauma, and I've done this with a couple of my other friends, is we just have an emoji that we send to each other when we're feeling just bad or down or just like needing that pick-me-up. So me and my friends, I put it in their contact, so because sometimes I forget what emoji, but it's been really nice because I don't have to say anything and they just know to act on that moment. Like if it's a call to my fiance to say what's going on with Ashley, is she okay? Because I realized a while ago I can't talk about my feelings. So we kind of agreed that an emoji was what it was, and same thing with them as well. As soon as they send it to me, I know I have to step in. So, it was just something little that we felt worked for us, and over the past couple years it has. So, just doing little things like that, figuring out what works.
I was going to literally say the same thing, but not an emoji. I use words like meatball or pizza, and so I use it with other people and friends, and I'm like, listen, if you ever need me, because I'm the worst texter. Yes, I know. And I'm the worst at asking for help for myself, but I always tell people, like, if you need me in that moment, just text me pizza. Just text me this. Like, we have a word for each other. And they'll do it, and I'll pick up the phone because I know they need me in that moment or at some point, right? And same thing. And it's so hard to ask for that and being vulnerable, but it's so important. And I think your friends that care and love about you want to be there, but this is an elephant for them too. It's like they don't want to ask because it might be really emotional, but you need that. You need to maybe need that shoulder or that ear.
And it also shows them that that's what your friendship is, that you're also willing to be there for them and that you value that relationship. So it's kind of modeling for them what the friendship could be. And we all have our seasons. There might be a season where they need more support. I'm going to bring this over.
Thanks. I was going to say it's also important for, I think, you to give them permission to ask, and like very explicitly. My cousin lost her 4-year-old son, and he was really, it wasn't HD related, but he had 5 quick months. He got sick and passed away, and while it was, and we're very close, and so while it was happening, I asked her explicitly, like, how are we going to handle this? And she told me, like, I want you to talk to me about it. I want you to ask questions. And then after he passed away, it was the same thing. She said, like, I want you to tell me when you're thinking about him. I don't want you to be afraid to text me on his birthday or ask me how I'm feeling. Don't be afraid, because that's how he'll stay alive for me and for everyone. And for me, supporting her, that was really, really important. So now, like, it doesn't matter if he was a Hulk, he loved Hulk. And so, if I see a little Hulk somewhere, I'm like, oh, I'm thinking of Logan today. And it's really allowed me to support her and not wonder, not question. So I think the clarity is really important.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we are at the end, and then some, I think. But I just want to thank you all, and Marianne and I will stick around, but we're here for you. HDSA is here for you, and I think there's a strong community that you can tap into as well. And I just wish you the best as you continue to figure this all out. Thank y'all.
Thank you.